For the first time ever, we are celebrating the Day of the Mediterranean, 28 November. As the Union for the Mediterranean, we want this day to show us that what unites us is stronger than what divides us. We want this day to show us that although there are periods in our past that divide us, we can create a common future. We want this day to be an opportunity to celebrate achievements, embrace diversity, to strengthen ties between our two shores, and to deepen our understanding of each other and address our common regional and global challenges. There is not one single issue in the region, from COVID to climate change, to energy and water sources, decarbonization, digitalization, lack of economic growth, unemployment and brain drain, poor infrastructure, weak regional integration, immigration, organized crime, terrorism, religious intolerance, hating the other, which can be solved by one country alone. We are condemned to solve these problems together or not at all. We are like the sculptures of Thomas Schutte called United Enemies, pairs of men who hate each other and want to get away from each other but cannot, as they are bound to one another with rope. In our small world and even smaller region, connectivity has made us each other's neighbors. We stress our differences and find it very difficult to get on with each other. We know that disputes among neighbors can be worse than disputes with strangers. As neighbors, we are bound to each other. However much we hate each other and want to kill each other, we have to find ways of living together if we are to address adequately our regional and global challenges. With eyes wide open, I dream that the way forward for this region is to resurrect the Helsinki spirit and call a conference on security and cooperation in the Mediterranean. Not many had high hopes for that conference in Europe nearly 50 years ago, when it was held in the middle of the Cold War. But it proved to be a turning point in the easing of tensions between the West and the East. We need détente in the Mediterranean. Dialogue and negotiation are mostly needed with those with whom we least agree. We have weakened multilateralism through division, polarization, and mutual distrust, and then we blame it for being fragile and ineffective. We have deprived inclusive multilateral structures and processes of leadership, legitimacy, and resources, and then blame them for being dysfunctional. We set up alternative arrangements of fake multilateralism that often marginalize and exclude those we disagree with, and withdraw into a bubble of like-minded countries and talk to ourselves. Let us define and make workable at least the minimum cooperation we must have to address our common challenges. The alternative is catastrophe. Thank you.
Special thanks go for the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malta for providing important framework for our discussion today. And there are a few messages from his statement. I think the first one is high clarity about what is the current situation. And this is always refreshing to hear this language of clarity. And also call to deal with issues like what he called the fake multilateralism that has only a form, but it doesn't have engagement. And also hope and call for action to do something, and very concrete proposal to have some sort of Mediterranean Helsinki process. Now, he said that he's dreaming of the more cooperative, more inclusive Mediterranean, but he also, in a way, called all of us to think about this turning point, how we can make our region more inclusive with what is inevitable, ultimately cooperation among different nations, the shores, countries, communities in the region. I think that provides an excellent framework for our pre-lunch chat today on the Day of the Mediterranean. I will go first to Ambassador Aljowaily, Amr, with his reflections on both his work in multilateral space and also digital space, and work in Cairo at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Telecommunication, but also now he's working in Belgrade as ambassador to Serbia. There are so many dots that you can connect, Tamer, in addition to your teaching on diplomacy. How would you start connecting the dots in order to realize this vision that Minister outlined in his introductory statement? Over to you.
First of all, thank you very much, Jovan, for this invitation from the Belgrade office of the DiploFoundation. So I'm happy to meet you virtually, although of course we always enjoy and appreciate the contribution that Diplo brings in physically and materially also to the Belgrade diplomatic scene. So allow me maybe first to, I'll divide my presentation into maybe two separate parts. One that basically is a little bit more official, and the second that is totally from my personal or academic contribution, as you kindly referred to a number of processes related to both Mediterranean diplomacy and obviously also ICT diplomacy. So maybe just to start with a little bit on the, say, on the official part, I'm very glad to actually share that officially Egypt is celebrating this the Mediterranean Day. I'm going to, hopefully it's going to work out to display this is the building of the Foreign Ministry of Egypt yesterday night, being basically lit with the letters of the celebration of the Mediterranean Day. It's not on the Mediterranean, but it's on the Nile. If you take the boat on the Nile and take the left side, you go straight to Alexandria and hence landing into the Mediterranean. So you can see how basically how there is a celebration of that event at the official level of diplomacy. There was actually there was an official statement issued by the Foreign Ministry today saying that the celebration of this first Mediterranean Day was adopted by the countries of the Union for the Mediterranean as a public day last year. And why is it today? As I think Arvin has mentioned when we were warming up to this discussion, because it is the silver jubilee of the Barcelona process, which was launched in 1995 and established the Mediterranean cooperation. In the same statement, Egypt basically reaffirms its belief in the Mediterranean identity. So you see here the very first approach is through an identity belonging among the countries of both of the Mediterranean. And then it refers to Egypt having played a unique role throughout the ages in communicating across the Mediterranean. Then it rests on the physical presence, basically referring to the distinct location, but also the continuity of cultures and civilizations. And then as an example of this is the city of Alexandria and the Library of Alexandria, contributing to the Egyptian thought on Mediterranean identity. It also refers to a diplomatic process, referring to Egypt playing a role for the Mediterranean unity since the 90s of last century, crystallized over the years by the Mediterranean institutions, notably now the Union for the Mediterranean and the Anna Lindh Foundation for Intercultural Dialogue, which, as you know, is hosted by the city of Alexandria. What are the issues on the ground? You will see that in the statement that it refers to the importance of the regional cooperation among the Mediterranean countries to combat climate change, illegal migration, irregular migration, fighting extremism, and realizing economic and social development. So here ends the more or less the formal, the official part, and you see how a certain occasion such as the one that we're celebrating today is an excellent opportunity, a platform to air out and to share views and perspectives, and to commemorate. I can tell you that quite a few of the millions of Egyptian citizens, and especially those who are subscribed to the Foreign Ministry's page, are now well aware of that occasion, and hence represent an opportunity for reflection and for thought. But let me get from that into a more, let's say, academic or so discussion. Whenever we speak about the digital era, we speak about time and space, right? So here, when we speak about the digital, the information society, the digital era, and how it impacts the Mediterranean, we should basically take from, I would suggest that we take from its impact on time and space, and how that will impact the interaction among the Mediterranean region. And here I would propose that we're basically moving from a geopolitics perspective that moved to a geo-economic perspective, given the resources that are in the Mediterranean. And now with the digital era, we're moving into a geocultural perspective. And why is that so? Because the information age basically makes us move from more material resources to more non-material resources, including elements that are constitutive of culture. So when we speak now about how the digital era is impacting the Mediterranean, as it used to be a shared geographic space, now we probably need to adopt a geocultural approach. The space that the Mediterranean occupied as a geographic phenomenon could have been one of separation, because it was not easy given, thousands of years ago, the technology and the tools and the abilities to cross that geographic barrier. Now, more and more, it can be an area of linkage and of continuity, simply because, first of all, the tools and the technologies have improved, and then now the geographic separation with the virtual world and the digital era is not as important, or is not as challenging as it used to be before. Also, I'd like to raise the point, the Mediterranean dimension, that yes, when we speak of the Mediterranean, immediately what comes to mind is the geographical space, right? The Mediterranean Sea. Now, as you said, I'm ambassador to Serbia, and I'm realizing so much of the Mediterranean spirit, the Mediterranean dimension, without having access directly to the Mediterranean. So we should really speak of it in beyond geographic contiguity. The same would apply to Jordan, for example, which is a country that is heavily, I think, contributive to the Mediterranean, yet it does not have access to the Mediterranean Sea. So I think we need to construct that concept of the Mediterranean beyond its immediate geographic contiguity. When we also speak about Mediterranean identity, and you saw that that was mentioned quite a few times today, and then how that is impacted by the digital era, we will see that with the increasing level of interaction due to the information and communication technology, due to the digital tools, basically, there can be a new constructed imagined community, just like was the case when the printing press obviously was created, and how that contributed to a constructed identity of an imagined community. But here we need to really start by a sense of parity, by a sense of equality, by focusing on the common origins. And I really like your blog where you chose those three scientists, among them Al-Khwarizmi, a great contributor to mathematics and science from the Arab, Asian, Mediterranean region and dimension. And just by merely putting that with Nikola Tesla and with the other contributors, you can immediately send in a signal of continuity, of commonality, which I think can really contribute positively to a Mediterranean identity that contributes to peace, stability, and the other positive aspects that we're all aspiring for. Finally, let me also speak quickly maybe about Mediterranean demographics and how that impacts the digital era. Well, now obviously the more contribution to the digital tools are coming from the northern of the Mediterranean. However, we also know that the northern of the Mediterranean, the average age is way, or the it's more of aging societies, while the southern area of the Mediterranean is more youthful. So yes, they are now maybe contributors to the digital tools and era, but very, very soon they can be contributors. So it's interesting to look at how the Mediterranean demographics will impact the digital era that we're living in now, and that we will be arriving to very soon. Finally, Mediterranean linguistics and the digital era. The information society is heavily impacting the linguistic landscape of the Mediterranean, particularly in the Arab world. You know, the Arab world, the southern shore of the Mediterranean, was for centuries basically centered about classical Arabic as a language, a written language. Now, social media and the different digital tools and platforms are making spoken languages also a written language, which is something that is very, very new, I think, at least in my perspective. It's almost like how the printing press, that's my view, and I haven't really examined it into depth, but I think I can argue it quite thoroughly. Like the printing press made vernacular languages of the written, and had that impacted the social, political, cultural phenomena in Europe. The internet and ICT and digital tools are almost doing the same for spoken languages in the Arab world, and basically giving them legitimacy as a written form of communication. How will that impact, you know, the construct of a Mediterranean identity and the compartmentalization of, you know, the Arab South and the European North of the Mediterranean? That is something that I think is very, very interesting and intriguing for research. So yes, on the official side, this Mediterranean Day is has helped you know, bring a discourse that will be widely shared among the populations. We've seen two examples, one by the Honorable Foreign Minister of Malta. I have also shared with you the official statement by the Egyptian Foreign Ministry. And then on the conceptual intellectual side, we see this door open for thinking about concepts that are going to be quite influential and impactful on the Mediterranean region. Again, my main argument will be geopolitics to geoeconomics, now to geoculture, and then how this digital era and the Mediterranean identity can be seen from a geocultural perspective. I hope I wasn't too long, but your challenging questions and your initiative of, you know, to bring about this new topics to us is an invitation for us to think creatively in that regard. Thank you again.
Amri, it is a real treat, and thank you for bringing official perspective in a very visual way. The Lotus style building of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Cairo send a message, and I think those messages are, I would say, even more powerful than the statements, which are definitely welcome. Well, thank you for that. But even on this second part of substantive, as always, you brought a few really interesting insights, which should inspire discussion in different communities. You added geoculture to geopolitics, geoeconomics, geoculture, which is really interesting aspect in many respects. You remind us about changes which are happening in society as we are discussing, the demographic changes, the changes, and I'm sure the Sonia will reflect on it in her statement on the youth, engagement in youth, where she's very much involved, and also in linguistics. Those are really deeper and profound changes which we can compare to the, let's say, moment when Gutenberg invented the press, and not only the invention of press, but also impact on society. And your notion that Mediterranean, along these lines of geoculture, doesn't end on the shores of the Mediterranean itself, on the sea. It moves to where you are now in Belgrade. It moves to up to Iran, and where Al-Khwarizmi stayed and wrote his first books. It moves to the southern shores beyond immediately North Africa. Therefore, that impact of greater Mediterranean, especially in this geocultural context, is great. Before the session, I was going through my library, and I was trying to see how many of my books are somehow related to Mediterranean, not in title, but in philosophy, in religion, in culture. I didn't manage to calculate exact number, but at least 1/3 of my books could be traced back to some thinker, philosopher, religious figure originated in the Mediterranean. Therefore, once more, thank you for this great framing of our discussion. Now we move to Malta, to the center of the Mediterranean, and build up on this notion which Minister mentioned about some sort of conference on cooperation and security for the Mediterranean. It is the old initiative of Malta since Prime Minister Mintov in Helsinki in 1975. And the idea that European security cannot be complete without security and cooperation in the Mediterranean. With us is Dr. Stephanie Borg Psaila, from Director in Diplo of Digital Policy Diplo, based in Malta. Steph, what could you add to this call of the Minister for the Conference on Security and Cooperation in the Mediterranean?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and Jovan, thank you for the introduction. Since I come from Malta, it's indeed a pleasure for me to be part of an event that celebrates the Mediterranean. So let me start off by wishing everyone a happy Mediterranean Day. We may not have the nice lighting on the facade of the ministry, but we do have also messages from our President George Vella, the official message in which he calls for more cooperation and inclusion and respect to fundamental human rights, and also messages from Minister Bartolo in the local press. So there is recognition of the day locally in Malta also. As a fellow Maltese citizen, I'd like to reflect a little bit more on the message of the minister, whom we've just heard, and particularly, as Jovan was saying, on his dream of seeing quite soon, maybe, a conference on security and cooperation in the Mediterranean. It's a message, or it's a dream that Malta has carried along various years. So it spans a few time periods, but there is an increasing opportunity to see this materialize. So it seems like a long shot, it seems like a challenge to achieve, but it's also a possible one. And I'd like to link this proposal of having a Mediterranean OSCE for the Mediterranean to a new area of policy, a new area which certainly wasn't around 40 years ago, and that's digital policy. So the policy of digital issues and of technology, as Amir right before me was describing. Digital field is a field where breakthroughs are possible. In this area, there are various issues which have brought governments together, even those who do not usually see eye to eye. And we're seeing this more and more. An example which comes to mind is the online protection of children, where governments and also other stakeholders collaborate together, they come together to make the digital space a safe place for the younger generation. There are many more other examples. So the point is that the digital field can indeed be used as a bridge for building confidence, for solving digital-related problems in the Mediterranean. What I'm mentioning here is already being discussed by experts. So this is why I thought it seems relevant for me to mention it here too. And some ideas of how to do this in practice are the following. For instance, bringing together cybersecurity leaders and diplomats from the Mediterranean region to discuss their common issues. As the minister said, these problems are not something that one country alone can solve. So bringing the leaders and the diplomats together, discussing what are the common problems and trying to find solutions. Another example is establishing an expert group that can raise awareness on, for instance, how to react to a cyber attack. It's the typical question that we're asking: whom to call, where to call to seek help. Other examples can be research and capacity development initiatives that can help policymakers in the region understand what, for instance, digitalization is, and how to tackle the main issues that have come up and are coming up with the emerging technologies. There are other confidence building measures that can help bring countries together, examples from other regions, and these can be used to build broader collaboration. So indeed, I do believe that one of the ways in which the initiative that Minister Bartolo spoke about is through the digital field. We can learn a lot from other regions who have developed similar areas of cooperation, but I think we can also be confident in the knowledge and the expertise that already exists in the Mediterranean. And the expertise that exists there, it can be used, it can be leveraged to make this idea a reality. So ending this on a positive note, Jovan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, for highlighting few important points. Definitely the appreciation in Malta for the Mediterranean Day, which is great and very important message. And also you raised the question how to do it practically, where to start with security cooperation, and indicated basically bringing together as a first step experts and building on the area where there are common interests. Fighting online, sharing of online child pornography is a common interest. And I'm sure that Mediterranean countries can build around this type of common interest. And what you said, developing some sort of red lines between cyber authorities. Let's say if there is attack on a cyber authority in Egypt, and it's the traces are going to some other country, that whoever is in charge could make a phone call. There are some technical cooperations, but that probably has to be left on the higher level and supported politically. And that could be an interesting ingredient for the OSCE for Mediterranean, building on issues which are not that controversial, where countries can get together. We'll hear later on from Amr and Sonia on this, how we may do brainstorming on this question of potentials to build on that, and also your point of moving concretely bottom up while having the vision in the mind. I think it's very, very well taken. Thank you. We move to Istanbul, the place where the Mediterranean lives its diversities, complexities in every day on the streets of Istanbul, and having with us Sonia, the digital communication expert, but also a person who is very passionate on the youth and digital policy and internet governance. And Amr mentioned that dynamics between younger population of Southern Shore and bit older population on the Northern Shore. Sonia, what could you tell us about that dimension of youth in the digital policy? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jovan, for the event and having me here to talk about youth and having youth on the agenda. as you mentioned, mainly my experience and what I've done about youth and around youth was usually around capacity building, especially digital rights and other digital issues, capacity building around and under the umbrella of internet governance, and starting with regional initiatives like youth IGF, national. Sorry, let me start again. Starting with national initiatives like the youth IGFs, and then going up to regional ones like Youth Dig, and then the global ones like Youth Coalition on Internet Governance. There are many abbreviations and many initiatives around the world that focus on youth. But for me, the main difference both in Turkey and around the region is whether these initiatives are by youth or only for youth by non-youth. I'm not going to, I think non-youth is a good way to put it. But talking of first of all, I'd like to start with wishing everyone a happy Mediterranean Day. And what Mediterranean used to be for me, especially when I was young, it's like vacation and beauty and history and art and philosophy. But like we saw, and we all mentioned, and our speakers mentioned, there are much more grimmer problems that the region is facing, such as the climate crisis, the migration crisis, the youth unemployment rates, and a lot more. And what we're observing, what youth is observing in the Mediterranean and all around the world is still, although it has improved, is being maybe excluded out of certain important initiatives or certain decision-making rooms. Jovan, you've also mentioned this when it was time for the conference in Glasgow, talking about having an empty chair in rooms for the future generations, because practically, I mean, basically, there isn't anyone actively defending the youth interests. I mean, but there is, but usually it's not themselves. So within the frame of the Mediterranean issues or culture, or within any problem that we may be talking about related to the digital world, I think when it comes to youth, the biggest issue persists. It's the underrepresentation of youth, and not having them beyond token participants or whatever in certain rooms or certain conferences. But there is a lot being done by youth and for youth all around the region. Like I've mentioned some names earlier, but there's also I found out while preparing for the Mediterranean Day today that there's a Mediterranean Youth Association found in Turkey, and it's entirely a digital youth organization that doesn't even focus on just one aspect, but they work on many different fields, including child abuse to climate change to digital capacity building. And there's also some other digital campaigns that try to amplify the voice of youth, whichever the problem is. Like there's a very successful one here in Turkey called arayüz.org by and for university students that was founded in the last 2-3 years, and it focuses on the issues, the general issues youth faces. For example, very practical things like how students can't afford to live in certain places anymore due to different reasons, or again, how youth is not heard in official discussions and in the government. And like a lot of the countries around the Mediterranean region, including Turkey, has a very young demographic, but our cultures in certain shores and in certain countries doesn't seem to appreciate youth enough. And I think today's youth, and I'm not considering myself youth, when I talk about today's youth, I mean people who are around, I don't know, from 15 to 25 or something. They tend to have a very different take on things. And like the three great figures that Jovan, you have mentioned earlier, I think they know better to cross boundaries and work together from different backgrounds and collaborate and have a better dialogue. And I don't know if this is me being biased, because I am youth and I've worked for youth and I believe in the power of youth, but I think they have taken in both the negatives and the positives that the instant, or not instant, but the very fast, rapid pace of digitalization has brought us. I think youth is using the advantages perhaps maybe better than certain groups. And I would just like to name some best practices from our region. Like I said, a lot of the youth IGFs here, and including Youth IGF Turkey, but there was also a few weeks ago, I attended, there's this digital capacity building group by youth from the African continent called Digital Grassroots. And that was a real, I mean, they've been going on for years, building capacity in different subjects, again, under the umbrella of internet governance. And they've been able to sustain these efforts because, as you all may know, what's the most difficult in certain capacity building or civil society initiatives is the sustainability. Sometimes there's a fire and there's a drive to start something and there's passion, but in a year or 2 years, that kind of fizzles out. And then you have all these initiatives which have started but didn't last, and then an overlap of initiatives and just new ones coming up. So I think a big success of certain youth initiatives are their sustainability. So they're not just starting something one day and then letting it go or losing their interest, but they're keeping their drive and continuing to spread their knowledge or energy or awareness. And that's one of the biggest inspirations for me when it comes to youth work. So I'd just like to, I don't want to take too much of the time. And I think we're also like closing in on the Mediterranean Day, but everything that our experts and our speakers and you have mentioned, and the Minister of Malta have mentioned, everything that is negative is sort of amplified in the age of digitalization. And we instantly know about everything that is happening, and usually the negative developments around the world, a lot faster than any other generation of humans that have been there. So it's easier to focus on the negative. But I think not just youth, but especially youth is also doing a great job in both digital capacity building or climate change or any other pressing issues that we have and have not mentioned. They're doing a great job utilizing all these new technologies to bring themselves together and to come up with solutions. But they just need, I think most youth initiatives and youth in general, they just need more space and more rooms on the table. And this is echoing what I've said 5 or 6 years ago in a global IGF, but that's still one of the priorities for youth. So I'd like to end by mentioning that. And once again, happy Mediterranean Day. I love the Mediterranean.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonia, for bringing another set of concrete ideas, and I would say a bit optimism in overall discussion, because we often hear that in youth discussions there is polarization and there are the stereotypes, and but you are basically arguing that there are talents and skills that may overcome polarization that exists in society, and then there are some potentials over that. That would be interesting to build on more. Let us just go, just to give a time for proper lunch, to go to another quick comments from first asking Amr, you heard about all of this, let's say, ingredients for the new Mediterranean cooperation dish, from the conference to youth to engagement to building on what we agree. What would you add for that, whatever lunch or a dish, and how we can make it as tasteful as Egyptian food and the Mediterranean food in general?
Thank you, Jovan. Well, if we think of the Mediterranean as as a shared space, which it is, then basically there is no limit to the menu a la carte. We basically have to include all the issues that we would include even on a national agenda, because as we saw, there is that level of interactivity, of cross impact between the two shores of the Mediterranean. I'll just maybe like to point out that in this regard, we have institutions, regional institutions that are focused on this. And in that, I note that in Barcelona, I think today or tomorrow, the sixth regional conference for the Union for the Mediterranean and the third ministerial conference for the EU and the southern neighborhood shore is convening. So I think this is also an invitation for the academics, for the researchers to examine more closely these regional institutions and the agenda that they choose. So tomorrow and after tomorrow, the ministers are going to be discussing environment, climate change, economic, social development, and digital transformation. So already we see that the issues that you raised in this very interesting session are high on the agenda of the senior officials. And that is, I think, a good sign. Since we talk about things, that's the first step to try to solve them if they form problems, and the first step to even enhance them further if they have good potential.
Thank you, Amr. We go to Steph. Steph, for your concluding reflections on this discussion or any other point.
Thank you, Jovan. I think I would build on a point that you mentioned, and that is finding the common areas of agreement, especially among countries who may not see eye to eye on, let's say, serious political issues, but there certainly are, and the digital space does provide the space for to find common ground. So areas where countries agree already and build on those. I think there are lots of opportunities there. It's just a matter of taking the bottom-up approach and building on it gradually. So yeah, those would be my key messages.
Thank you, Stephanie. And so Sonia, any comment from your side on how to bring all of these elements together, and what would be the message for the meeting which Amr mentioned tomorrow and day after tomorrow in Barcelona?
Well, I think my personal message would be to continue dialogue and continue cooperation in every area possible, because more and more in the modern world, in the digitalized world, we're seeing that moving or taking action just as a country or just as a single stakeholder group is not solving any of our problems. So with keeping that in mind, I think events like this, initiatives like this, and the other efforts that may flourish from this are very valuable. And as I hope the biggest group that should be aware of this and should act accordingly, I think, is youth. And that's why I'd say, yeah, more power to dialogue and cooperation.
Thank you, Sonia, and thank you our panelists and all of those who joined today's discussion. The message is rather clear. The current situation is not really promising. There are many conflicts, there are many tensions, there are many problems that were listed by in Minister's introductory statement, but also in our discussion. In the same time, the potential, since it is a relatively low starting point at current moment, potentials are huge to develop cooperation, in particular to develop cooperation in the field of digitalization, because these issues are probably among the least controversial issues when it comes to all countries and communities in the region, and to start building a confidence that may have a spillover effect on the other issue areas. And first important steps could be taken over the next few days in Barcelona, but it is a long journey, and the Mediterranean learned in its wisdom how to make these long journeys and how to deal with the conflicts and how to turn these moments of tensions into moments of prosperity. And with that important message, I think we contributed to this really great a la carte offer for lunch. I wish you a pleasant rest of the day, good lunch, good discussion with your friends, relatives, and the families on, well, on the Mediterranean, but also on the issues that we are facing in the Mediterranean around the future of humanity, around the sort of question of our free will, our question of the cultural diversity, many, many issues that you so eloquently listed today, and we will summarize in for the after the session discussion. Have a nice day and celebrate in the creative way the Day of the Mediterranean. All the best.